This is the S2G podcast, where we share conversations that help us understand how to scale the food, agriculture, oceans, and energy transitions. I'm your host, Tanya Bekritzes. In this episode, John Foraker, CEO of Once Upon a Farm, talks to Chuck Templeton about what it takes to bring natural, healthy food into the mainstream. As a reminder, this content is for informational purposes only. It should not be taken as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, or be used to evaluate any investment or security, and is not directed at any investor or potential investor in any investment vehicle sponsored by S2G. Investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. Specific companies mentioned in this podcast are for educational purposes and should not be construed as an endorsement of any kind. Please note that S2G may maintain investments in some of the companies discussed on this podcast. For more important information, please see s2gventures.com/disclosures. Very few people know how to build a mission-driven food brand better than John Foraker. John was a longtime leader of Annie's from 1999 to 2017. He grew it from a small grassroots company in Vermont, taking it to IPO and then selling it to General Mills. Today, Annie's is a mainstay for boxed mac and cheese and other snacks. But back in the day, the idea of putting an organic and natural brand next to craft products was pretty unheard of. John played a huge role in making healthy, sustainable foods mainstream. And then, like many of those who have entrepreneurship in their DNA, he left Annie's ready for a new challenge. He's currently the CEO of Once Upon a Farm, which he co-founded with Jennifer Gardner, Ari Raz, and Cassandra Curtis. He's once again trying to change the way customers shop. This time with refrigerated baby and kids products that are organic, nutrient-dense, and irresistibly delicious. In this episode, John talks about what it took to scale Annie's and now Once Upon a Farm, from fighting for positioning in grocery stores to selling customers on real and sustainable ingredients even before the USDA certification was available. There was a fateful meeting with Jennifer Gardner that led to him jumping on board at Once Upon a Farm, trying to get coolers in the baby aisle and completely shifting the brand's focus and so much more. It's really a great conversation about having the foresight to understand where a trend is going, get people to believe in your mission, and then change the status quo. So let's dig in.
So I've been in the food business since about 1994, 1995. I grew up in Northern California, thought I was going to be a farmer, come from a farming family, spent most of my summers on the back of a D7 cat, and went to college to be a farmer. And then when I was graduating, I decided to go work for a bank. Then went back to business school at UC Berkeley, graduated in 94, and then jumped right into a startup between my first and second year there that was in the specialty food business. And then that led me to Annie's, and I became an investor in Annie's in 1998 and then started running that business in 2003. And we ran that business out of California, grew it up to a pretty significant business, and took it public and then sold it to General Mills. I'm sure we'll talk about that stuff. And then I've been over here since 2017 working on Once Upon a Farm.
As you started getting into your career, how did you get into natural foods and healthy foods? What was it that brought you in this direction?
There's really 2 points of intersection that I remember. The first was when I was working in the summer at my family's very conventional rice farm up in Northern California. There was this really small organic rice business that was just starting to get going. These 3 brothers started this thing called Lundberg, which now very big brand. But at the time they were doing organic, and they hosted a rice exposition day. And I remember going to that with all these conventional farmers, and most of the conventional farmers were scoffing at it and saying those fields are full of weeds, et cetera. But I remember thinking like, wow, this is a really cool thing. They're really trying to do something different. I was about 17 at the time. And then the next intersection was when my son, Jack, was born in 1992. And my wife was telling me about the different food choices we were going to be making because he was in the house and all the research she had done about it. And those are really the 2 things. And then at that time, it was so clear to me, just looking at the environment out there, that what you would call like the traditional health food industry at that time, which was Whole Foods with 30 stores. It was like independent natural food stores with bulk food bins and people wearing Birkenstock shopping them. That whole world was starting to collide headfirst with the specialty food world, which was all about interesting, great taste and everything, but not so much health. And those two things were just steamrolling together in the late 90s. And it was very clear to me that that was going to be a really big business opportunity. So I looked to position myself to participate in it because I was so interested in the intersection of health and business and change that was happening in consumer packaged goods.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like you're part of the OG that's really been helping to bring a lot of these products, I'm not sure mainstream yet, but much more mainstream than they sort of ever were. You talked a little bit about Annie's. Walk us through your experience there and some of the big lessons that you learned. I mean, obviously that brand grew to be a tremendous household name.
Yeah, so I got involved in it, as I mentioned, as an investor when it was about $6 or $7 million. It had been started on the East Coast. They kind of ran out of money and were looking for some capital. So I helped put together a round where we basically bought the right to control it and invest capital in it to really grow it. And it was an incredible brand DNA that they founded. It very much reminded me of what Ben and Jerry's had done. The brand stood for a lot of things. On its packaging, it was very quirky. It really connected with a consumer on a different level. And in 1998, they were working on their first organic product. That was before even the USDA organic certs came out in 2002. So they were well ahead of their time. And in 2003, we brought that business to the West Coast. I started running it full time then. It was probably about 20 or 25 million in revenue. And it was still mostly mac and cheese, although we had just extended into cheddar bunnies, which was basically our version of a goldfish snack cracker. And so Annie's was one of the first brands that really did two things. We really leaned into being mainstream positioned, still premium, but like mainstream position. So we fought really, really hard to get out of that little corner hut at the back of the grocery store that had the quote unquote natural foods in it that many of you will remember, and position ourselves in the mainstream aisle right next to craft. And then obviously, as we brought in other categories, that was our philosophy. And I'd say for the next decade, we were hand fighting that retailer by retailer. And what we were able to do is we were able to build a story that showed that when you brought an organic brand like this into the mainstream set, not only did the entire set grow faster, but we became a really important contributor and we brought new and different consumers into the store that retailers really understood. If you looked at the demographic data of the way consumers were changing, the millennial consumer was coming. They weren't there yet in terms of household formation, but what we knew about them made it really clear that when they did form their own households, they're going to make a lot different decisions. So I remember the pages out of our deck, we were talking about this wave that was going to break across CPG over the next decade. And we're a brand that's like uniquely positioned in our category to help retailers win against that. And it was a very slow adoption of that. But once retailers really understood that, the business really started taking off. And then in 2012, we took it public and we had a really, really great public offering. I think we raised 90 million in the IPO and the stock traded really well. And then we were on that journey for about a little under 3 years, growing that business, trying to navigate the complexity of being a public company. And then we had a quarter where commodity costs really killed us and our P&L took a hit. The stock took a little bit of a dip and all of a sudden the phone started ringing. So we ended up going into a process and General Mills bought the business in 2014. And then I stayed on for 3 years running that business, helping them integrate it, helping, I guess, give them advice across their entire platform about how to do more and better with their existing national organic brands, of which they had a lot. They're a real leader. So Annie's was mainstreamed, but then also the second part of it, as I alluded to, is leaning into purpose-driven values and culture and really standing for things that consumers that bought the brand cared about. Those were the two things we did that were really resonating. And that's why Annie's continued to grow and has become such a beloved brand.
When you were in that 2002, 2003, 2004, how was your price point relative to the competition? And how did you justify those differences and whatnot?
So we were generally about twice as expensive. And there were a few realities of that. One is our ingredients were a lot more expensive than theirs, no doubt. I mean, the first ingredient in our cheese was real block cheddar cheese. It wasn't dairy byproducts and other stuff.
Crazy.
Right. And so we leaned into that by talking about like, hey, would you like your mac and cheese to actually have real dairy? Like this is what a wedge of cheese looks like. That's what we're using. We also leaned very hard into organic. We leaned into sourcing all of our wheat organic and then RBST free cheese. People don't talk about that much now because RBST is basically out of the cheese supply and milk supply mostly now. However, back then it was a real consumer flashpoint and it was extremely hard to find dairy that was RBST free. So we had to really work for multiple years on a supply chain that could actually allow us to segment dairy that didn't have that and then make cheese with it. Those things really resonate with consumers. It was about quality. And then hey, at the end of the day, like it was a great tasting mac and cheese. Kids loved it. And then parents felt better about giving it to their kids. And that's really been a core part of that brand equity ever since.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story and a great foundation for where you're at now. Because that's about when I met you, I think is in 2017. Mm-hmm. Walk us through what Once Upon a Farm is and how you co-founded, got involved at that point.
Sure. So in 2014, when Mills bought the business, I ended up with some personal cash for the first time in my life. And one of the things that I was interested in doing was investing in some other brands and businesses and spaces that were not competitive with Annie's, but just were areas of interest for me. And one of the top ones of those was the idea of fresh baby food. And when I was running a public company at Annie's, I got to know the team at Fresh Pet really well. I watched the disruption that they were doing over in the pet aisle. And through all the research we had done at Annie's, talking to lots of moms and dads, it was so clear that there was this desire to do something different and better in baby food. A lot of parents were making their own. They were very dissatisfied with the choices that were available in the shelf-stable aisle, which largely were brands that had been there for decades. So I thought, hey, I think there's a great opportunity to do something in fresh baby food. Why has no one ever done that? So I looked around and I tried to find a company that was either doing it or starting to do it. I couldn't find anybody. About a year later, the phone rings and a person I knew in the space said, hey, I know you've been looking for this. I just helped these guys do a rebrand to Once Upon a Farm. It's a small company based in San Diego. It's Ari and Cassandra. He said, you guys should meet. And they sent me a deck. And literally, I think 2 or 3 days later, I wired them a bunch of money. And I was like their first bigger outside investor. So I really believed in the idea. It was still super, super early. This business was probably like $200,000 a year, maybe. Fast forward about a year and a half, as they're building it out, Ari calls me up and says, hey, Jennifer Garner, obviously the globally well-known actress and activist, she's interested in getting involved in the business. This aligns very much with like her own personal values and what she's interested in. She saw you were on our cap table and in the investor deck, and she said, hey, can I meet him? So I went down there, had a very long meeting with her. We talked mostly about the challenges that kids had across the country getting access to really good food, particularly in rural areas. And we kind of aligned on the idea of like, wouldn't it be great if there were a brand that actually could deliver against these changing nutritional requirements and what consumers were looking for, with a purpose-driven ethos that was focused on like expanding access and making a difference as we grew. And long story short, we kind of shook hands at the end of it and said, hey, I don't know if there's an opportunity here, but let's explore it. I'm in if you're in. And then we went through a process to figure out if we could make that work. And then we did. And then in September 17, Jen and I came together with Ari and Cassandra as co-founders, business with less than $1 million in revenue. And we embarked on this crazy journey that it's been in the last 6.5 years.
Yeah, I think we were looking at the cap table and saw you on it early on. And that's when I wanted due diligence, reached out to you as well. And I think we sat there in Berkeley in that parking lot, sort of talking about.
We did. I remember I was at the Claremont Hotel. I just had a meeting there. I was standing on this balcony. I was talking to you and you're like, yeah, we at S2G, we think we're going to put in $250K, which was probably about what I had just put in. I'm like, this is cool. You guys are going to co-invest with me in this thing. Right on.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. And then the journey of that afterwards, because we just love the idea of HPP and no sugar added. So let's go into that a little bit. So what was the essence of the product then at that point? And what got you excited about the direction they were going? And why did you think you could scale it like Annie's as an example?
So what got me excited was the product. And I agree, like the HPP technology was something that I had watched when we were at Annie's. We had watched what Suja and others had done in the juice category with it. It was really
And can you
amazing.
tell everyone what HPP is?
Yeah, it stands for high pressure pascalization. And basically what you do is you make this amazing product like you'd make it in your kitchen, like say in a blender. You put it into a pouch, and then you basically put it into a chamber that fills with water and submits it to pressure for a very short period of time that's equivalent to the deepest pressure per square inch at the deepest point in the ocean, I think the Marianas Trench, for a very short period of time. What that does is it knocks back any potential pathogens or things that would grow, and it gives you a little shelf life, but it doesn't cook the product. It's all done at about 40 degrees. So there's no change in the product. So when you do a mango like that, it looks like a mango that's been in a blender, and it tastes like that 2 months later. It's amazing technology. So,
and it keeps the nutritional value too,
keeps
right?
the nutritional value, a lot of phytonutrients and things like that don't get cooked out. So the flavor, the color, all those things. So that's basically what got me excited, was the product was so unique. And then I knew there was this consumer opportunity, but then the biggest question was like, how are we going to grow this thing? And so we just embarked on a journey over the next few years to really figure that out. And that was a real entrepreneurial journey.
John had the experience of bringing Annie's and the whole concept of organic, better-for-you foods and snacks into the mainstream. Like he said, before Annie's, health brands were relegated to a stand in the back of the store. This effort to change the way customers saw organic premium food products is what took Annie's from a small company to exit. At Once Upon a Farm, John again worked to transform the way people think about a certain product and how they purchase it at the store. Once Upon a Farm's products are refrigerated, but at that time, there was no refrigeration in the baby aisle.
Yeah, so here you are. You scaled Annie's, then took it public, and then sold it to General Mills. And here you are in this company with lots of resources and very large and embedded systems in place and all that stuff like that. And then you jump off and head into Once Upon a Farm, which is, like you said, $200K a year or so in sales in a couple hundred stores. So what were some of those early lessons?
Yeah, pretty much every ultimately successful CPG company goes through a series of pivots. And then the question is, how do you react to them and what do you do? So my first thesis for this business was pretty clear. It was like, we're going to take the fresh pet idea and we're going to go to retailers and we're going to build this out in the baby aisle. And that was a great story. And I remember the first model that Larry Waldman, who was a guy who worked with me at Annie's, agreed to come over here in November, right after I had joined, and work with me on it. He's a real finance and operational expert. And we put this model together, and it was really based on coolers. And we went out and we had some coolers in test. Our Aunt Cassandra had gotten some. Right when I got there was
and this was, and sorry, John, to interrupt. This is coolers in the baby aisle.
In the baby aisle, yeah.
Right. Most stores, obviously, as everyone knows, all the refrigerated and fresh stuff's around the edge.
Yeah,
Dairy section of the baby
thank you.
aisle.
The product that was out there mostly was in dairy sets positioned next to kid yogurt. That is one of the most competitive spots in the store. I mean, it is brutal because if you're in that set, you have to compete on a turns and dollar basis with everything in that set, which includes some of the biggest yogurt brands Chobani's in that set, Stonyfield, 40-year-old incredible brand, right? So the bar was really high. I thought that the best place to go would be over in baby. So we went out and we talked to a bunch of retailers right away. We got a few retailers like Nugget Markets in Northern California here, put in a bunch of coolers right away. We started getting some traction, but then we pretty quickly realized that it was going to take forever. It was going to be really slow and obviously capital intensive. And so I worried that if we went that route, other competitors were going to come and kind of beat us to owning this idea. So we pivoted and we basically said, okay, the strategy now, and this is probably by about January of 2018, is we're going to take this into dairy. We're going to position it against kid yogurt, and we're going to try to build out a set there. And so we did that, and retailers bought that story. They loved it. And we went from around 300 doors or so to about 8,500 doors by August or September of the following year, 2018.
Few CPG companies can scale that quickly, but John knew that Once Upon a Farm had the ingredients they needed to grow rapidly. There were still some major learnings along the way.
The biggest one was we stretched our distribution just a little too wide. The product was doing okay, but it was not lighting it up. So in 2018, late 2018, 2019, we really doubled back down and started looking at our business and going, what do we need to do? And we talked to lots of consumers, and we came to a couple of insights. One is our packaging needed to be strengthened. We need to bring more color to it. We need to talk about the benefits. But the biggest one in the context of all that work was we had been positioning and talking about the brand as baby. But the most important thing we learned is that about 75% of consumers that came into the brand, yes, they came into it in baby, but 80% of the consumption after that was kids ages 1 and 2 and above, right? So we were really a kid brand, but we were talking about ourselves as a baby brand. So we did things like we took baby off the package and we put no added sugar. We added a lot of color to the product. We did a successive packaging improvements. And each time we did that, the velocities doubled. And then in 2020, actually 2019, going into 2020, we did like a modernization rebrand where we really made the brand more vibrant, more modern looking, talked about the benefits in a way that's aligned with what I just said. And then the business just took off. So once that happened, we really knew we had something on the kids side. And then we've just, for the last 6 years, we've just been pounding that core business, expanding distribution, making sure the set is just as wildly productive as it can be, trying not to go too wide, upsizing, all the things that you do to like drive a business like that.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your SKUs, because it's kid and toddler food. And so they don't want the same thing every day. So there needs to be some level of variety. Right. Obviously, every additional SKU that you put out there can cost money. So talk to us about how you learned about SKUs and how many, and then how you position together as a brand.
There's always learning. Each category is a little bit different, but you're always pushing the envelope. Like as an entrepreneur, you always let's say you've got 6 SKUs at Whole Foods and they're doing really well. You're like, I need 8. I want 10, right? And I remember actually we ran into a buyer in about 2019 who we went in and pitched for a very similar thing like that. And she said, nope, I'm holding your SKU count at 6. I think it was what it was. And we were so disappointed. We're like, the data says that we deserve more. And she said, I've seen countless brands like you expand breadth too fast versus building out your core. And I remember being really disappointed with it. But honestly, like a year ago, I sent her a note saying, you were absolutely right. By keeping that core pretty tight and driving it, we built a lot of loyalty and repeat in those core items, and that provided a great foundation. So it's a real test. You want to drive as big a block as you can to get breakthrough at shelf, because that's the first moment of truth. And there's tons of research that says that most people don't plan their purchase. In fact, nobody plans a purchase of a brand they've never seen before or heard of, right? And so when they walk in, if they can see your brand block, it looks like something they're curious about, they pick it up. That's how you can break through. But then another thing that we did, I mentioned we pivoted toward dairy, and that turned out to be a great move. But we never stopped working on coolers. We knew that that was going to be a big idea. It was going to take many years, and that the products were different. So when you walk down a baby aisle, a mom or dad who's doing that is looking for a nutrition facts panel, NFP that we call it. And that would be different largely than what they'd be looking for when they were looking for a brand over in kid yogurt, right, in that space. So we did is we split the line and we created like a baby line. We call baby out very clearly, baby NFP. Those products are only sold on our website, our direct-to-consumer website, which is about 10% of our revenue. And then we have the kids stuff, which is the biggest part of our business that we've been talking about. And then for the last 5 years, we've been testing coolers. We've been working with the biggest retailers, 50 coolers here, 30 coolers here. And now what's happening is we've really come onto an algorithm that works in coolers, and we're expanding those. And we have big national retailers that are expanding those coolers. So we're growing in 2 places in the store, which is kind of rare, but it adds a lot of complexity to the business. It adds more SKUs. You have to balance that. We have about 60 SKUs total now, which sounds like a lot. It is. It's actually more products because we have multi-packs and other configurations. But part of the reason that we have more SKUs is because we're attacking 2 parts of the store with different assortments. And as those coolers become more and more mature, the turns increase and it grows and grows and it just becomes easier and easier to manage. And that's really where we are right now. It's really starting to get scale.
I mean, it's one of the things that I feel like I have learned from you, and James Richardson writes a lot about it in Ramping Your Brand, about really focusing on how to get that velocity to turn. So do you believe in the like fewer SKUs or fewer stores out of the gate and really focused on them? Or do you feel like the footprint's the most important for younger entrepreneurs?
Yeah, no, James Richardson and I have worked really closely together. I brought him in 2019 to help me figure out some of the things that we were struggling with. And one of his first things was like, get rid of that, get rid of that. What are you guys doing? It's like the idea, you have some great products, like focus on like a core assortment and fresh snacking and really pound that core. I totally embrace that. And, when we think of like new stuff that we're doing now, we kind of do think like that in terms of like, let's get a small placement here or like this one chain here. Let's test it and learn. Ironically, when we launched in 2018, like I told you, we did not do that. And I knew that that was breaking the convention. And I think I turned out to be right, but I was wrong in the sense that I was breaking the convention and it made it way riskier. But I also knew that to get scale in this business and to get the costs where they needed to be and to be able to break through in a category like yogurt with obviously Jen's like air cover and the ability to generate billions of media impressions, we needed it all to come together in a big way. So I decided to go big. And fortunately, it worked. It could have easily not worked. If they didn't believe enough in the idea, the breakthrough disruption that we were bringing, I'm talking they retailers, or the product hadn't sold at all or whatever, we would have been up a creek. I mean, it would have been really tough. So I don't recommend what we did to anybody unless you had the right combination of pieces, like trying to break through in a very crowded category with something wildly different. You had a genuine co-founder who could really help you get the word out big time. And you had a supply chain that we thought we could build pretty fast to be able to get to scale it and improve quality. We had all those pieces together, which kind of was why I did it.
But I think also that you had is the ruthless, and this is in a good frame, but like just knowing we got to get the product better, we got to get the product better, get the product better. Like you just leaned in. And so that's where like you as an organization could move quickly. I think a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes fall in love with something or don't want to learn and change their product fast enough when it's needed.
I would say like my bias, and I've learned this over time, is like you're never going to have perfect information. You just got to go. And you're better off moving fast and making fast decisions and then making some wrong ones than you are by just like sitting around. And so we were aggressive, like even in 2019, as an example, like Cassandra's products were amazing, but there were things about them that could have been better. We make product with like fresh and IQF ingredients, and every batch is a little different. We were seeing a little variation in batches, still great, but like this one's a little pinker or this one's a little redder or whatever. And we put it to Cassandra and said, Cassandra, you've already got amazing products. Go make them better. And she did. Like literally in 2019, she went through every single formula, made it better, made it taste better, made the nutrition is just as good. The cost came down. And then that was also a huge part of what caused the business to just rocket.
Despite having over 60 SKUs and operating in 2 different parts of the store, you can rest assured John is still thinking about the next product or iteration of the Once Upon a Farm brand.
Well, as we discussed, like we really focused on pounding this core and creating this incredibly productive core and really building the brand in millions of households. That was mission number 1. Once we had done that, we felt like it was time to take the brand into some adjacent categories where we thought we could bring similar disruption. We started working a couple of years ago on growth spaces for us, and we launched the first one in September, just this last year, and it was into the refrigerated bar category. We launched a refrigerated oat bar at Target in our sets there and at Wegmans, and that's gone extraordinarily well. And it's a really great opportunity for us to take this consumer that loves us, give them another refrigerated, disruptive product that their kids are going to love, the parents are going to love, and then help us age up the portfolio of our kids in the brand. We see other opportunities like that, and you'll see us expand into other adjacencies. It's one of the reasons why I think this can be so much of a bigger brand. We're north of 100 million now and accelerating. And what's interesting, and I saw this thing happen at Annie's too, is once you got into that like 30, 40, 50 range and it was really working, the business started to grow a lot faster, not in percentage terms, but in dollars. Like the chunks of growth just got bigger and bigger and bigger. We're in that zone now. I mean, well over 100 now. We'll be at 200 pretty fast. And I think the brand can be 500 to $1 billion. I really believe that. And our mission here is to really create a disruptive kid nutrition brand that's going to change the game for kids everywhere. And to do that, you need to build something big and at scale that's widely available. And I think we're way on the path to that. A lot of work ahead, but you can see the foundation has been set. Now it's just all about execution to make it happen.
So you mentioned Jen. I mean, Jen has just been a fantastic partner in the business and a true co-founder, like the title fit. So talk about how it is to work with Jen and how do you find the right balance between where you can each add value along with Sandra and Ari in this. So how does that work?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I had not ever really worked with a quote unquote celebrity in any of the business prior. So it was new space for me. But as I mentioned, like in our first meeting, she was talking about her work with Save the Children, which she had done for probably a decade at that point, the things that parents were telling her when she was on those trips and the challenges that she had as a mom when she was making her own baby food, literally between takes in movies. You can hear her tell those stories, but that's real. Like she really was that mom, right? And so it was such an authentic connection and we hit it off so well. She came right in day one. She's been really on the leadership team the whole time. Like she's on our weekly leadership team calls for a couple of hours every week, getting deep in the business. She and I have probably been in well over 100 customer meetings together, flew all over the country in 2018, trying to break the brand in. She's constantly talking and connecting with people inside the company that I don't even see. And what I've learned from her is a few things. One is her work ethic is like second to none. But the other thing is she's a big thinker. She'll just come in and go like, but what if we just think way bigger than that? How about we just go blow this wide open? Why don't we go talk to that guy or that person? She just will push us to a higher level. And it's created a culture here that I'm super proud of, and we all are. And It's been fun to work with her too.
Yeah, I mean, sitting in a board meeting with her, on a call with her, and I mean, she's in it. So one of the other things that you're sort of legendary about within S2G is your Friday emails that you send out. And so walk us through just like what you like to include on that, why you think that's important.
Yeah, so what they are, just to define what they are, it's an email that has three pieces: sales, marketing, finance, and operations. It takes me 10 minutes to 20 minutes most of the time to put it together. And the original genesis of that email was probably around 2007, 2008. I was at Annie's. We had private equity investors there. There was lots of growth, but lots of challenges. And I realized that if you can trust the investors in your business and your board members, if you can trust that they won't overreact, and I mean that in two ways. One is if you say something that great happened to the business, they won't go nuts and like, we're so excited and like 18 emails talking about it. Or if something challenging comes up in the business, they're not going to freak out. If you can trust that that's the case, being transparent about what's good and bad going on in the business is a really good way to communicate. And so I started doing that and it became a habit actually. And it's evolved. In my Annie's days, that email only went to the board. At O Farm, it started that way, but it's evolved that email goes to the entire company. So what you see as a board member, so we have that exact same email I paste into our Slack channel, so every employee in our company sees the exact thing. So it serves a communication purpose, upward and outward, but it also, for me, is like a time for me to think strategically about the business. Like, what did we accomplish this week? What are the new challenges that are ahead of us? What do I need to be thinking about doing in the next week or two to deal with some of those issues? And so it's almost like I can't shut off my brain on a Friday night until I've done it. But I enjoy it. And honestly, our people are super empowered by it.
Yeah, two comments there. One is it's sort of meditation, a little bit of getting your thoughts put somewhere that you can then move on from, right? But also I agree, like one of the things about working with early stage companies is there is ups and downs every week, right? You lose a customer, you get a customer, someone quits, a competitor gets funding or whatever. Like there's all these sort of things that can happen in a week's period or even a daily period that feels like just the world's ending or you're on top of the world, either one sort of thing. So I'd love just your thought or last area, just how you approach leadership.
I think it foundationally starts like with one really important principle, which is I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. I know that there are many people out there that know way more about me about any topic, and I'm constantly trying to learn. And so from my early days at Annie's, I was always trying to surround myself with people that could help elevate me and elevate the business. And I'm very humble about like the success that we've had and I've had in the past, because am I responsible for some of it? Most certainly. But are there lots of other people that are responsible for it? Absolutely, including even some good luck at times. And the other thing is, leadership is a journey. Like in 1994, when I started running my first company, I had no effing idea what I was doing. I had to learn. I had to make lots of mistakes. I was successful at Annie's, but I'm a way stronger leader than I was then. Way stronger manager of people. My style of management has evolved and changed over time, including even over the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm sure if I stay in this game, like 5 years from now, I'll be way better than I am today, because it's a constant journey. So if you're any leader who's sitting out there, just know that like, if you keep working on your craft, you're going to be better at it 2 years from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, you're going to grow. And that's the growth mindset. And then the other most important thing I'd say is it's the cultural belief that every single person in the company is just as important as everyone else. It doesn't matter what their role is. That's fundamentally, I believe that. And that's how you build one team.
So, John, thank you for today. Really, really appreciate it. Like I tell my whole team, I feel like I get an MBA every time I sit in one of your board meetings or read one of your Friday emails. So really appreciate it. And we're huge fans. And so thank you for your time today. I know you're busy and have a lot going on. So thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for all your support, and all the folks at S2G. Thank each of you. Really appreciate you guys.
Many people can make a great product, but from Annie's to Once Upon a Farm, John has been instrumental in bringing novel, healthier categories to scale. His experience is a lesson in picking up on the early signs of shifting trends and creating brands that meet the moment and are bold but highly adaptable. It has been a pleasure to get to learn from him, and we can't wait to see what he does next. Thank you for tuning in to the S2G podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, or share it with a friend. For more information or to connect with us, check out s2gventures.com.